Welcome back to the Hope Neighborhood Learning Center. I'm so excited that you've continued with me on this journey of learning how to program our own smart contracts in Solidity. Last time we looked at the blockchain on Etherscan and what a blockchain explorer is, and we looked at what gas prices are as well as how those prices are calculated. And so today we're going to take it a step further and we're going to take a deeper dive. If you've been following along, you've been using the Remix IDE, and you may have found that it is kind of difficult to work with in terms of saving or backing up. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at it here. So let's say I'm going to look at one of the default contracts that initializes when you open up the IDE. And one thing that you can do is you can click on Home, and you can go up to the top here and download all files. And what that'll do is that'll save all those files as a backup file and as a .zip file. And then you can open those files later and continue to work on that program. Now, that will require you to always maintain connection, download often. You know, I'm an obsessive compulsive saver. I've lost so many projects because things crashed and I wasn't able to save it. And so I would prefer to be able to develop locally and then upload or deploy to the Remix IDE. So I dug around on the internet a ton, and I actually found this really great video. I'm going to put a link up in the top here. You can watch it yourself, and that's where I learned how to set up a local IDE and connect it with the Remix IDE in order to develop locally, but then debug and deploy through Remix itself. And I feel like this is a pretty streamlined process that I've learned about here. So after doing some digging, I found a great workflow on this YouTube video that I'm going to place a link above that shows a very streamlined way of working on your local machine and then uploading and deploying on the Remix IDE, and that is with the tool called Visual Studio Code. I downloaded Visual Studio Code and I liked it right away. It's a very lightweight application with a bunch of extensions for all sorts of different things you may want to do. The second thing that you'll need to download is Git, and this allows you to control your releases. The third thing is Node.js. Once you've downloaded all three of these things, we then can connect Visual Studio Code to the Remix IDE. So at this point, you may want to pause the video and go ahead and download those three things. All right, so now that you've downloaded and installed Visual Studio Code, Git, and Node.js, we're ready to begin to set up our work environment. First thing you want to do is create a file on your computer, and I just saved my file and called it demo. And then we're going to go ahead and open up that file within Visual Studio. Okay, now that you've opened up Visual Studio Code, we're going to go ahead and go to the extensions and type in the search Solidity. And this one is by Juan Blanco. Go ahead and install it. I've already installed it, so that's why it shows uninstall, and it will do the syntax highlighting we need to program our smart contracts. And then go back to my Explorer and then launch a Solidity file. And so I'm going to call it demo1.sol. And because we've downloaded that extension, it already has a little Ethereum icon to the left there, and we have a blank smart contract. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and open up the terminal. So I'm going to click new terminal. So the next step is to install Remix, and we're going to type in. So the next step is to install Remix, and we'll type in npm i-g at remix-project/remix D, and then hit enter. Then after you've done that and installed Remix, what we're going to type in is remix D -s space dot, hit enter. And what this does is connects our IDE, our Visual Studio Code IDE, to the Remix IDE. And you'll notice some warnings here. So I put a link in the description as to what those warnings are and how we're connecting to the Remix IDE through these local ports. and what the risks are associated with that. So you can check that out. The link is in the description. So let's hop over to our browser and look at Remix IDE. And you'll notice up here there's this workspaces zone. And you can see default workspace or connect to localhost. So we're going to go ahead and select connect to localhost. And then this connection warning will pop up. Make sure that you read through the documentation. Go ahead and click connect, and then it should load over here. Great. So now we see demo and demo 1. And so we can see the demo here that I started, and this is what we're going to start today. So now that we're connected, I want to run a little experiment here. So let's go back to the default workspace. And just let's grab this storage example that comes when you launch Remix. And so I'm going to go back to the Visual Studio IDE and start a new contract. And I'll go ahead and call it storage.sol. So I've copied the code into the Visual Studio IDE, and we're going to hop back over to Remix and look at what's here. And so you'll probably have to reconnect to the local host in order to see that file show up. And then there it is, our storage file. And then what you'll need to do is click on the compiler, compile that storage file, and then you should be able to deploy that. So let's go ahead and look at this. I deployed it. Here, let me delete that first one. I had tested this out once. So let's deploy that. And then now we have this storage contract here. And then I'll go ahead and type in 3, store, retrieve, and a 3 pops up. We can do this again and test it. 4, store, retrieve, 4 pops up. We were able to create essentially a contract here, store it, save it, and then access it through the Remix IDE, compile it, and deploy it. And then debug and deploy on the Remix IDE. So I personally like this workflow. I got this from that video that I shared the link to earlier, and I'd highly recommend watching that video a couple times. There's a couple other things that he goes through in that video that I think will be helpful. For right now, we don't need to connect a wallet. Later on, I'll come back to that sort of thing once we're ready to deploy a smart contract on a testnet. This is where we'll stop in terms of the workspace setup for today. And we're going to go back over to Visual Studio. We're going to go ahead and work on our next demo here. So I'm going to open up demo 1, and you could call this, actually, let's rename it. I'm going to rename it to Ballot. So, or is there, hold on, let me check Solidity real quick. I faintly remember there being a Ballot Contract. Yeah, so, it'll work. In Remix, it can go over here. In Remix, it shows 3_ballot. So we're going to do something similar to what's shown in here, but starting from scratch under the ballot.sol section. And anytime when you're in your Explorer within the Visual Studio IDE, as long as you put .sol at the end of it, it knows that it is an Ethereum contract, smart contract, because of the plugin or the extension that we added. So I'm going to delete that trash. Let's go over to Ballot, and we're going to start a new smart contract. You may have figured it out. This smart contract that we're going to be building today is a voting smart contract, and you might think, well, that's kind of interesting. Why would you want to develop a voting smart contract? Well, there's these things called DAOs. They're decentralized autonomous organizations. And the idea behind them is that a decentralized group of people run that organization. And the way that you would manage changes is through voting. And so coming up with a robust ballot system that is efficient for the DAO would be a really good idea in terms of managing changes and upgrades and whatnot to that decentralized autonomous organization. So that's where Ballot come in handy. And so we're going to take a look at the Ballot written in the Solidity documentation today. And so if you want to follow along or you need to go back to what we're doing here, you can follow along within the Solidity documentation, which I'll provide a link in the description for. And remember, I'm learning in this process just as you are. And so I imagine as we go through this in the future, we're going to think of different ways we could have done this and ways to improve on it as well. And that's one of the things that's interesting inside the documentation is they talk about some of the downfalls of what we're writing here and prompt us to think of different ways of doing things, which I always like to begin to process through that as I'm learning something new. And that really challenges my mind to think beyond just the mechanics of what I'm doing and to learn how to problem solve. So let's get started here. We will type pragma solidity, and then we're going to specify our version. So if you recall, there's different ways of specifying our version. We're going to actually set a range this time, and that's just because that's what they did in the documentation. And then remember, always in your lines, the semicolon here, and then there seems to be something funny going on. Let me put a space. Oh, that's why. All right, there we go. That should be better here. Yeah, there we go. Missed a period. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a smart contract called Ballot. And so, this struct function is essentially a variable that contains many features. And then we're going to define what a voter is in this ballot. Oops. Need 2 slashes. Define a voter in this ballot. Cool. So let's go ahead and start with the struct. And let's call it voter, like we said. Then we're going to do the curly bracket. And then we're going to do an unassigned integer of weight, as in the weight of that vote. And then whether or not that person voted. And so bool is like a true or false statement. And then the address of a delegate. And then another unassigned integer called vote. Great. And then our next step is we're to build a structure around proposals. So the example I gave earlier of a decentralized autonomous organization, folks are going to have, within that organization, they're going to have proposals of changes that they may or may not want to make. And so we're going to specify a short name. So 32 bytes. And then we are going to set an unassigned integer of the vote count for that specific proposal. So in other words, this is the name of the proposal, and then this guy here is how many votes that specific proposal received. All right. Next, what we want to do is assign the chairperson. And so similar to the coin example, where the owner was the only one who could mint the coins, in this case, the chairperson is the only one who can submit the proposals for a vote. So we need to assign the specific wallet address of that chairperson and map that to the public proposals that will then be voted on. Simply, the chairperson is the one who can create the ballot that contains all the proposals. So we're going to type in address, public, chairperson, and then our semicolon. All right. We want to map the address. Mapping, and then address to the voter. And public voters. Now we want to capture a matrix of proposals. And so we're going to create an array that can be dynamically sized based on the however many proposals are submitted. The next thing, constructor, and we're going to look at the names. Memory, proposal, names, and then let's do a curly bracket here. Chairperson, you got sender, and then voters, voters chair, person, dot weight, and we are going to create a for loop here. Unassigned integer, I equals 0, where I is this proposal names length plus curly brackets proposal push. Okay, it looks like we have a problem here, and I think I just realized what I did. I typed in to create a smart contract, but I actually didn't start the smart contract here at the top. So we're going to go ahead and create the contract ballot. And then, let's see, so we'll have to add the in curly bracket here. And I think that's great. Okay, that fixed that. And then we have another problem here. So it says it's expecting a colon. Oh, that's because I typed in the wrong thing on the name. And so we're going to add a colon there. And then what's going on here? Oh, semicolon there. There we go. And then I forgot to add an S there, it looks like. Yep. All right. So fixed all my mistakes there. Everything looks like it's working well. And we're going to go ahead and stop here. And then in the next episode, we'll continue our ballot smart contract. But I want to look back at the Remix IDE So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to look back and see how things are going with the connection here. And then let's connect to the local host again. Click connect. We should still be connected. Great. So Ballot's there, and our code is all here. So I don't know. Let's just see if we can compile this. Compile Ballot. Oh, we didn't put in our license. So to my Visual Studio IDE, and I'm going to copy and paste from the storage example. Put that into here. I'll save that, and then go switch back over to Remix, and then let's go ahead and compile it. Let's see if we. Oh, we need to place new content. There we go. All right, so now we have our license identifier. Let's see if it'll compile properly. It looks like it did. This is great. What I like to go over next is disconnecting the Visual Studio IDE from the Remix IDE. So let me switch back over to Remix just so we can see that we're still connected to the local host here. If you look up in the corner on the left side. Now let's go back to Visual Studio. What we can do, if you click on Node here, you can see something that says kill terminal, and for some reason it's not showing up on the video on my screen, but it is showing up when I click on it. So I'm going to kill the terminal. So now the terminal is killed. Let's go ahead and switch back over to the Remix IDE, and we're going to see a note here, and it says connection to Remix D terminated. Please make sure Remix D is still running on in the background. We'll click OK, and it'll show us this connect thing again. I'm going to click cancel, and so now cancel. So now we're stuck on this default workspace where we had the contracts that are default with the Remix IDE. Let's go ahead and click connect to localhost, try to connect, and we'll see that we cannot reconnect. So we are unable to reconnect. And that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be continuing on the Ballot smart contract in our next video.